My childhood sweetheart looked down on my poor background and the fact that I was an orphan. She said I could never compare to her colleague, Makoto. She insisted on breaking off our engagement, even if it meant fighting with her parents, and swore that even if I became the top scorer in the national exams, she still wouldn't marry me. But she never dreamed that not only did I become the top scorer in the entire city, I also became one of the few people back then to earn tens of thousands through a scholarship, and return to her doorstep with a betrothal gift. She was overjoyed, thinking I had come back to reconcile and propose again. But to her surprise, I walked past her and held her sister's hand instead. When she found out she would have to start calling me brother-in-law, she completely broke down. Chapter 1. The day before the engagement, I saw Alicia scribbling something all over a sheet of paper. It was a detailed comparison between my family background and Makoto's. One's a delivery driver for the local supply co-op, dirt poor, no parents. The other's a hospital doctor. Family already has tens of thousands saved. Parents still young and healthy. Even a fool knows who to pick. There's no way I'm marrying George. He'd better back off. I took her advice and let go, willingly. What Alicia didn't know was that, after being reborn, I also had a list. Mine was filled with all the cruel things she did to me in my previous life. This time, the one I want to marry isn't Alicia, it's Willow. 1982. A courtyard house in the suburbs of Beijing. Waking up from a nightmare, drenched in cold sweat, I was determined not to repeat the tragic end of my last life. I immediately went to my uncle and asked him to arrange a marriage swap with the Liu family. For once, I was a little nervous. Uncle, Willow is a major in the military district. I'm just a co-op driver. Will she even agree? My uncle puffed on his dry tobacco and smacked his lips. I've got her phone number. We'll ask. Just wait for the news. Hearing his agreement, the heavy weight in my heart was finally lifted. After my father passed away, I had been living here in this Sihiyuan with my uncle, relying on each other to survive. Alicia wasn't wrong when she said I had no parents. But even without any comparisons, as someone reborn, I knew one thing for sure. This time, I would never marry her again. Just then, someone tapped on the window. A faint female voice came through. George, Alicia wants you to meet her at the skating rink. Coming, I replied, getting up to dress. Since I'd decided to be a complete stranger to her in this life, there were things that needed to be said. From now on, Miss Liu could leave me out of all her little plans. When I arrived, the ice rink in the Beijing suburbs was packed. Alicia stood at the center, holding Makoto's hand. Dressed in striking red, she stood out from the crowd. Before I could get close, someone slammed into me from behind. The sudden force knocked me off balance, and I was sent flying across the ice. The cold pierced into my bones like hundreds of tiny needles, sharp and unforgiving. I winced from the pain. Alicia glided toward me from afar. I thought she was coming to help me up, but instead, she stopped, looked down at me with a glance of disdain, lifted her chin, and scoffed. Makoto was right. You really are useless. You can't even skate properly. What makes you think a man like you deserves me? Don't think you can force me into marrying you just because your dead father had some ties with my family. I'm telling you, not a chance. Back when we were teenagers, she used to smile and call me hero brother. Now, all she does is scowl and call me a useless loser. Alicia's voice wasn't quiet, and people around us began to gather, ready to enjoy the drama. He really is dumb. Isn't it obvious that Alicia and Makoto are made for each other? Why would he even try to get between them? They both work at the hospital. They're a perfect match. And him, just a broke delivery driver trying to chase a goddess. Exactly. Makoto's about to get officially hired as a full doctor after the exams. What does George even have to compare? The spittle of those onlookers practically splattered all over my face. Waves of ridicule rolled in, mixed with the icy winter wind, biting into my skin and making it sting. I didn't rush to explain. I simply pushed off the ice with one hand and stood up slowly. I looked calmly at the proud woman in front of me and said in a steady voice, Alicia, I know you don't want to be engaged to me. Don't worry, I won't bother you anymore. Besides, my bride isn't you. My firm tone and composed expression made Alicia frown, something she rarely did. But the next second, a man's voice cut in from behind her. George, now that's not right. You two grew up together. How could you play hard to get with Alicia? The speaker was Makoto, Alicia's colleague, and the man she had feelings for. He was also her lover in my previous life. Makoto had always been skilled at stirring the pot. Any words from his mouth always ended with me being in the wrong. Just as expected, Alicia's eyes lit up with sudden understanding after hearing him. The disgust in her eyes deepened. Save it. My heart's not with you. Even if you died right in front of me, I still wouldn't marry you. The crowd erupted into laughter like a pot boiling over. Amidst the laughter, I calmly repeated, I said, I won't bother you again. That only made everyone laugh harder. In our little courtyard in the suburbs of Beijing, with its 6 or 7 households, everyone knew how deeply I had been in love with the second daughter of the Liu family. To get her fabric for a new dress, I once waited outside the supply co-op all night in the dead of winter. I got the fabric, but ended up in the hospital to buy her a pair of new leather shoes. I scrimped and saved for an entire year, stretching every dime like it was worth 5, refusing to spend even a penny on myself. And now what? Saying I didn't want Alicia anymore, that I wouldn't chase her. Everyone thought I was joking. Alicia gave a cold laugh, looking at me with narrowed eyes. You'd better keep your word. As soon as she finished speaking, she grabbed Makoto's hand, pushed past me without hesitation, and skated straight into the center of the rink. My ankle still throbbed from the earlier fall, and with this shove, I lost balance again and crashed down, the side of my forehead turning bruised, my knee slamming into the ice in a burst of searing pain. As pain shot through me, my mind drifted. Once upon a time, Alicia and I really were childhood sweethearts. But after my father passed away, I missed the college entrance exam and ended up a co-op driver. Her gaze toward me started to change. Every time she spoke, it was about how amazing the Wong family was, or how brilliant Makoto was, how he got accepted into the hospital without even taking the exam. The warmth and affection in her eyes slowly turned to coldness and contempt. But I truly loved her. When the Liu family suggested honoring my late father's wish, I didn't hesitate to choose Alicia. But that choice in my past life didn't just bring me humiliation, it cost me my life. I looked at Alicia deeply, and without a sound, mouthed a few words. This life, I'll set you free. Chapter 2. As soon as I got home, Uncle was already waiting at the door with medicinal wine in hand. The moment he saw the bruise on my forehead, he didn't even bother asking and told me to take off my shirt so he could rub it for me. The moment he pressed down with his hand, the pain made me grimace and gasp, begging for mercy. Uncle, be gentle. He shot me an annoyed glare and said, every single time you go out with her, you end up hurt in one way or another. If you ask me, it's better to change people. I don't think Liu area is good for you. She's nothing like Willow, who's steady and reliable. I pursed my lips and after a moment, forced out a sentence. If Willow doesn't like me, breaking off the engagement is fine too. Uncle snorted. Your dad once saved Uncle Liu's life. He's not around anymore. And the Liu family cares a lot about saving face. They wouldn't dare be the ones to call off the engagement. I think there's a good chance this will work out. When it came to Willow, deep down, I was actually grateful. In my past life, when the supply and marketing company restructured, my job as a driver was given to someone else. After that, Alicia's already cold attitude turned downright nasty. She basically lived at the hospital, never came home, and every time I asked, she just said the hospital was busy. Everything at home, inside and out, was left to me alone. After Willow was transferred back to a military unit in the suburbs of Beijing and found out I was jobless, she arranged a position for me that very same day, driver for one of the leaders. Later on, after a car accident left me disabled, it was Willow who ran around pulling strings, finding rehab hospitals and the best doctors for me. Right up to the moment I was killed, Willow had remained single, all alone. If things can work out this time, I'll treat her right, as a way to repay the kindness from my last life. Lost in thought, I was suddenly startled when Uncle clapped his hands and came over with a big grin on his face. You lucky brat. It's really happening, Willow agreed. She'll be back in a few days to get engaged to you. She heard you're preparing for the college entrance exam and said she'd send someone tomorrow with study materials. Now that's a girl who knows how to get things done. Hearing this, the corners of my mouth couldn't help but curl into a smile. They're sisters, born of the same parents, so how can their personalities be so drastically different? In my past life, when Alicia heard I was planning to take the college entrance exam, she mocked me to my face. Then, in the days right before the test, she kept dragging me out shopping, either to try some new candy or to catch the latest movie. I had grown used to being ignored by her for years, so when she finally deigned to ask me out, how could I bear to refuse? But because I couldn't say no, I had no time to review, and in the end, I buried my own future. Luckily, this time around, I've got another shot at changing my fate. I sighed, turned off the light, and crawled into bed, silently promising myself, I won't be that foolish again. The next morning, Willow's materials arrived. I happily accepted them with both hands, thanking the messenger repeatedly. The young woman chuckled and teased, no need to thank me, just invite me to your wedding banquet when the time comes. Before I could ask anything, she dashed off giggling. I was left standing at the door, red-faced and at a loss. In the days that followed, I stayed home, studying from morning to night, having 2 lifetimes worth of learning under my belt. I felt much more at ease this time. During this period, Alicia sent people to call me out several times, but I didn't go. I didn't know if she wasn't used to losing her little tag-along, or if being publicly rejected had annoyed her. One day, Alicia showed up at my house with Makoto and a whole crowd, making a big entrance. Seeing me studying under the lamp, she immediately started mocking me with her sharp tongue. Oh wow, I knew he was up to something. He's just jealous that Makoto and I work at the same hospital. And now he wants to apply to medical school just to see me every day. Him? Don't make me laugh. He should take a good look at himself before talking big. Makoto got a special recruitment offer from the hospital, and I passed the exam myself. What does he have? Just the ability to drive. As soon as she finished, the crowd burst into laughter. I lowered my eyes and stayed silent, fists clenched tight. I knew arguing with them was pointless. The strongest form of retaliation is to pass the college entrance exam and change my fate. In the past, whenever people mocked me, Makoto would always step up to pretend he was the bigger person and say a few words. This time was no exception. He turned and gave the others a scolding look, then pretended to defend me. You guys are too much. Just because you're not taking the exam doesn't mean you should mock George, even if he probably won't pass. At least he's trying. Gotta put on a good show for Uncle Lou and Auntie Lou. Right. Chapter 3. Though Makoto was speaking to the group, his eyes kept drifting toward Alicia. Between the lines, it was clear, he was implying I was only taking the college entrance exam to put on a good show for the Lou family, just to get them to approve the engagement. As expected, with that subtle push, Alicia's expression darkened immediately. Without a word, she marched over and slammed my book to the ground with a loud thud. She kept her usual arrogant tone. Stop dreaming. If a useless loser like you can pass the college entrance exam, then pigs can climb trees. Give it up. No matter what you do, I'll never agree to this engagement. Don't waste your time. Let's go. Let's hit the streets. I need to cleanse my eyes. Some people didn't quite get what she meant with that last remark, but Alicia casually glanced at me and added lightly, "Oh right. Just saw something filthy. That's all." The group erupted into laughter again. I clenched my jaw, swallowing back the storm brewing inside. The pain in my chest was suffocating, and my palms were dug red from how tightly I was gripping them. Right now, I probably looked just like a stray dog, pathetic and embarrassed, but I couldn't afford to fight back. Not now. The college entrance exam was just days away. I had to endure. I took a long, deep breath, repeatedly reminding myself to hold on. Only after everyone had finally left did I quietly close the courtyard gate, go back inside, and pick up my books to continue studying. For the next several days, I immersed myself completely, day and night. I ate, slept, and studied like nothing else existed. It wasn't until I stepped out of the exam room that I finally let out the long-held breath in my chest. It was like I was exhaling all the suffocating frustration and deep pain from my previous life, cleansing my soul in one go. As I returned to the courtyard, all the neighborhood aunties greeted me with bright smiles, asking how the exam had gone. Just as I opened my mouth to respond, my childhood friend Martin grabbed my arm. "Tonight's my birthday. You better come." I was about to refuse, but Martin sneered and said, "What? You haven't even passed the exam yet and you already think you're better than me? I'm inviting you personally, you know." He put it like that, so I couldn't very well decline. I nodded and agreed to go. It was a cold winter day, and I arrived at the state-run restaurant promptly at 6 p.m. When I entered, 2 full tables were already set, packed with friends from around the neighborhood. Naturally, Alicia and Makoto's crew were also there. I hadn't even sat down when the teasing started. "Hey Martin, this is a dinner party, why'd you invite a dog?" Yeah. Saying one thing and doing another, pretending he's done bothering Alicia, but secretly scheming. My mom said Aunt Lou's already asking around about the engagement banquet. At that, everyone's faces changed. They crowded around Alicia, bombarding her with questions. "You're really getting engaged to him? How does he compare to Makoto? Remember how he always played dead every time you invited him out?" Alicia snorted coldly, raising her red lips into a sneer. Her almond-shaped eyes were filled with a cold, cutting smile. "You're all overthinking it. Someone like him? Not even close. The banquet's for my sister. She's coming back in a few days, and those times I invited him out, I had my own reasons. If he failed the college exam, my parents would never have the heart to force me to marry him." Her voice wasn't loud, but to me, it sounded like thunder crashing right above my head. I felt dizzy, like a bomb had gone off in my skull. My temples pulsed painfully. All the peace I'd felt after finishing the exam vanished instantly. My face turned ghostly pale under the harsh white light, making me look practically dead. I had never imagined that, in my past life, Alicia had deliberately sabotaged my exam. I thought she was just a girl being playful and immature. I never realized it was all calculated, a scheme to avoid marrying me. The noise around me continued. A few girls chimed in, their voices sharp and cutting. "Someone like you isn't even worthy of carrying Alicia's shoes. Stop embarrassing yourself. Come on. He's been obsessed with Alicia since forever. You think he's not still clinging to her? That stuff he said last time was just to fool Alicia. You all believed it." Pfft. But hey, the Lou family has more than just Alicia. There's also her sister Willow. Their cruel words mixed with shrill laughter, piercing my eardrums and making my head spin. I instinctively wanted to argue, but Alicia had already strolled over to me, staring down with a cold, condescending face. If even I don't want you, what makes you think my sister would? Chapter 4. After saying that, she glanced at me and added, I've talked it over with Makoto. If you really can't live without me, I guess you could be my servant. It'd be barely acceptable, but just a servant, don't get any other ideas. Hearing that all too familiar line, I wanted to laugh. In fact, I actually did laugh. In my past life, even though Alicia and I were legally married, she always treated me like I wasn't even human, barking orders at me, never once showing basic respect. She made me hand wash all her clothes, and sometimes even forced me to wash her lover's laundry too. Anytime I questioned it even slightly, she'd go into a hysterical rage, and just to keep the marriage going, I swallowed my pride again and again. If that wasn't being a servant, what was it? Watching the crowd around us go from mockery to outright cruelty, the fury I'd bottled up for so long finally reached a breaking point. My voice rose with it. Alicia, that's enough. I'm only going to say this once, I will never like you again, and the one I'm getting engaged to isn't you. It's. Before I could finish, a sudden shout came from the doorway. Who brought those pastries on the table? What did you put in them? Makoto just ate some and threw up. Everyone gasped in shock and immediately turned toward the door, quickly clearing a path. Makoto stumbled in, his face pale as a sheet, clutching his chest and dragging his feet step by step. The same girl who had been mocking me just minutes ago now ran to him in a panic, helping him up with a deeply worried expression. What happened? You were fine just a moment ago. He ate one of those jade pastries on the table. Someone chimed in. Just a few minutes later, he started vomiting and nearly passed out. Makoto turned to Alicia, managing a weak smile as if to reassure her that he was okay. Then suddenly, he turned to me, wearing a look of understanding. I get it. You're jealous that Alicia and I are close. I understand. I won't blame you this time, but don't do this again. Things like this can kill someone. Before he even finished speaking, he pretended to collapse, as if he were too weak to stand any longer. At that moment, every pair of eyes turned to me, filled with disgust, contempt, and ridicule. Even the birthday boy Martin stared at me in disbelief. Before I could say a word in my defense, he spat at me and scoffed. I invited you because we've known each other since we were kids. Never thought you'd do something like this at my birthday party. People like you make me sick. We're done. Get out. I looked from Martin to Makoto, back and forth. There was a flicker of guilt in Martin's eyes. He couldn't even meet my gaze and quickly looked away. At this point, what more was there to misunderstand? I didn't bring any pastries. The gift I brought tonight was a book. But Makoto insisted the drug dessert was mine. Martin didn't even ask, he just decided I was guilty in front of everyone. From the start, this had all been a trap set for me. When Alicia saw Makoto pass out, she was frantic. She stormed over to me and slapped me hard across the face. If anything happens to Makoto, you'd better be ready for prison. As she turned to leave, her eyes burned with hatred. She scanned the room and added, Makoto's always been good to all of you. Now that he's been hurt, you better do something for him. Just don't kill him, leave him breathing. That's all. Then she propped Makoto up in a chair and ran outside to call a car. That dessert wasn't mine. Alicia, can you listen to reason for once? Before I could finish, the crowd swarmed around me. Within seconds, several people had knocked me to the ground. Fists rained down like a storm, pounding into my body over and over. Each blow sent sharp waves of pain through me. I couldn't even speak. I just curled up, hugging my head in a pathetic attempt to shield myself. I could no longer tell which hurt more, the pain in my body or the anguish in my heart. And then, Makoto returned. Without Alicia there to watch, he didn't even bother pretending anymore. There was a soft, fake smile on his face, but his foot stomped down hard on my face. He ground it in, twisting with force. With a sneer, he said, "Try to steal my woman again, and this is what you get." Chapter 05. The hatred of 2 lifetimes surged through me, dragging memories along in its wake. I was so consumed with rage my eyes felt like they were bleeding. The taste of blood flooded my mouth, and I stared at him with crimson eyes, lips stained with blood pressed into a tight line. Just as I was about to lose consciousness, someone shouted from behind, "His uncle's here." The people who had been beating me scattered like frightened birds. By the time Uncle walked through the door, there were barely any people left. The moment he saw what I looked like, Uncle's expression turned grim. His eyes swept the room before he barked out, full of authority, "Who did this? No one's getting away." Then, he picked me up and was about to rush me to the hospital. But I stopped him, my voice hoarse. "Uncle, take me to the police station first. We can't let this go. I won't take the fall for this." Seeing that I could still hold on, Uncle didn't waste time arguing and turned straight toward the station. Before retiring, Uncle had served in the military, so he still had some sway. Before long, the police had taken my statement and told me, "We've understood the whole situation. We're starting the investigation immediately. You should go to the hospital now and get treated." I thanked them and was finally taken to the hospital by Uncle. After a full body checkup, the results came back: a fractured shin and multiple soft tissue injuries of varying severity. Only after hearing that it wasn't life-threatening did Uncle finally breathe a sigh of relief. He told me to stay in the hospital for observation and went back to prepare some food for me. I slept through the night at the hospital, finally able to rest and recharge. I thought I wouldn't see Alicia again so soon, but as fate would have it, the hospital I came to was the same one Alicia worked at. Just as I stepped out to get some water, I ran into her. In just one night, Alicia's attitude toward me had taken a complete 180. She followed me into the ward, saw the fruit basket on the table, forced a smile, and said, "George, let me peel you an apple. I'm really good at it." I frowned, unsure of what she meant. I was just about to speak when the auntie in the next bed let out a chuckle. "Ah, young man, your girlfriend really cares about you." "She's not my girlfriend," I said awkwardly, quickly denying it. For some reason, the way I hurried to distance myself hit Alicia the wrong way. She had always clung to me like an unshakable leech. Why did I reject her so quickly this time? She felt a twinge of annoyance, but her hands kept moving. Just last night, she had been ready to kill me. Yet this morning, here she was, calmly peeling fruit at my bedside. I felt like I was dreaming, momentarily dazed. Back when we were teenagers, she would occasionally peel me a pear or bring me fruit. But after she grew up and more guys started hanging around her, she rarely even looked me in the eye. In my past life, no matter how much I gave her my heart, she never once returned it with sincerity. Thinking of that, my nose stung, and a deep, prickling ache settled in my chest. I sighed softly and spoke plainly. "Just say what you came here to say." Alicia's voice was uncharacteristically soft. "Yesterday, Makoto was taken away by the police. He's about to be made permanent staff. At a critical time like this, nothing can go wrong. Can you please?" "Heh, I knew it." I gave a bitter laugh and swallowed the sudden wave of sorrow. My eyes were cold as ice. "Say no more. I will see this through to the end. No one can talk me out of it." Hearing that, Alicia slammed the half-peeled apple down and gritted her teeth. "George, don't be so ungrateful. I came here to beg you in person. What more do you want?" She was never the kind of woman to bow and scrape. She had endured this much only for Makoto. I didn't answer. My bloodshot eyes stared straight at her, and silence blanketed the room. Seeing I still wouldn't speak, Alicia grew frantic. She lashed out, furious. "I knew it. You just want to use this to manipulate me. Force me to give in, right?" Makoto was right. "You are despicable." She spat the words out one by one, her eyes brimming with hatred, like she wanted to tear me apart. That expression, I had seen it in my past life, the moment she suffocated me with her own hands. I still remembered her feral, twisted face as she ground out. Makoto said, "As long as you're alive, you'll always be in our way. You're already crippled anyway. You might as well die, then we can finally be together." In that past life, she had married me under her parents' orders, and in the end, killed me for Makoto. Now, reborn and having changed fate's path, she still wanted to marry me for Makoto's future. In the end, in both lives, the one man she was willing to fight for was always Makoto. But this time, I wouldn't have it. I gave a silent laugh, my tone unwavering. "Alicia, do you even understand human language? I don't need your compromise. You're not my bride. Now leave. I don't want to see you again." Chapter 6. My refusal to budge drove Alicia into a rage. Just as she was about to lash out, my uncle walked into the hospital room. With him there, she didn't dare make a scene. She gave me one last glare and left in a hurry. Still uneasy in hospitals, I had my leg cast replaced and left with my uncle that same day. As soon as we entered the courtyard, neighbors from both sides came out to offer their concern. Only Martin's family was nowhere to be seen. Uncle didn't care. After helping me back into my room, he grinned and brought over a package. "This came for you yesterday while you were out. Willow sent someone to drop it off." I opened it and immediately saw the title, "How the Steel Was Tempered." My eyes lit up, and I couldn't suppress the joy on my face. How did she know I was looking for this book? Uncle snorted and teased. "How should I know? Ask her yourself next time." I ran my fingers slowly over the book's cover, memories flooding back to me. In my past life, after I was crippled by Makoto's car, there was a time I nearly ended it all. It was Willow who kept me going, encouraging me, comforting me, and even leaving this very book behind before she left. On countless sleepless nights, this book was the only thing that kept me going. And now, in this life, she had sent it again. A warmth surged in my chest. My nose stung with emotion. Even when I was beaten to the ground and had my face crushed under Makoto's foot, I hadn't shed a single tear. But now, I almost wanted to cry. While I was lost in thought, a noisy commotion erupted in the courtyard. I peeked out the window. Makoto and his gang were back again. "Makoto, did you really get taken to the police station that night?" Makoto's gaze swept past the window and, deliberately raising his voice, said, TCH. Just a false alarm. Alicia used George's fiancé's name to forge a medical record and handed it to the cops. That got me off the hook. See, I'm perfectly fine now. Once the college entrance exam results come out, I'll still be officially hired. Standing at the window, backlit by the sun, I clenched my fists so tightly that veins popped, and my cast-wrapped leg trembled. The suffocating rage in my chest surged, aching with pressure. After a moment, I collapsed into my chair, clutching my chest with both hands. Eyes squeezed shut. Makoto kept talking. He glanced toward my house. Seeing that no one came out, he leaned closer to the window and sneered. You probably haven't heard, the top scorer in the suburban district's college entrance exam this year is someone with the last name Wong. His smirk stretched wide as he exchanged looks with the others, his meaning clear. All around him, faces lit up. Damn, it had to be Makoto. He's just built different. No doubt he'll go to the Liu family and propose. Guaranteed success. For real, if Alicia marries the top scorer, that's next level prestige. Alicia stood in the crowd, beaming, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Then someone hesitantly asked, but isn't George's last name also Wong? As soon as that was said, Alicia's smile instantly vanished, replaced by a cold stiffness. The next second, the entire group burst into thunderous laughter and mocking jeers. Stop it, I'm dying. If George is the top scorer, I'll chop my head off and serve it to him. That guy's nothing but a loser, just a body to fill the count. How could he compare to Makoto? Alicia's face shifted slightly, as if something crossed her mind, but she quickly laughed it off, shook her head, and added, exactly, if George turns out to be the top scorer, I'll propose to him myself. Outside the window, their laughter didn't stop. Every piercing cackle turned into a sharp blade, stabbing into me, traveling through my blood and lodging in my heart. My eyes burned red, and a metallic taste rose in my throat. My trembling fingers fumbled across the table, trying to grab onto something, anything, until they finally landed on that book. How the steel was tempered. Only then did the shaking in my chest slowly begin to settle. By the time I came back to myself, everyone in the courtyard had dispersed. The next day, it was time to change the cast again. Uncle escorted me early in the morning to the surgical ward of the hospital. Just as we were about to go in, I stopped him. Uncle, I know this place. You go ahead. Don't want you being late to work. Uncle paused for a moment, then nodded. All right, I'll come pick you up at noon. I turned and hobbled in on my crutch. As I passed a half-closed hospital room door, I heard a sound like a wild cat in heat. I looked inside. A familiar figure was pressing a woman against the hospital bed, their bodies moving rhythmically. The stark contrast between their skin tones stood out in the shifting motion, and even the bed frame creaked loudly under the force. It was Makoto. That woman. A complex mix of emotions welled up inside me. I thought that seeing them like this would tear me apart, but when I touched my chest, it was calm, utterly still, not a ripple in sight. Maybe I was just numb now. I gave a bitter chuckle and was about to move past the door when it suddenly opened from the inside. The woman, now tidied up, shrieked when she saw me, covered her face, and ran off. Makoto followed casually, glanced at me, then leaned in with a sneer. What are you looking at? Don't tell me, you've never even tasted a woman, have you? Don't worry, I've tasted Alicia for you. She's not bad. Chapter 7. He thought I would be angry, furious even, that I'd grab him by the neck, but I didn't. It was as if I hadn't heard him at all. I gave no reaction. I didn't want to engage with him. I tried to walk past him, but Makoto glanced behind me, then suddenly raised his hand and slapped himself hard across the face. Staggering a few steps, he leaned against the wall and cried out theatrically. George, I already apologized to you. Why are you hitting me again? He turned his head toward the approaching figure, wearing a pitiful expression. Alicia, I was just apologizing for what happened last time. But before I could finish, he slapped me right across the face. Alicia's heart clearly ached when she saw the bright red handprint on his cheek. Her expression darkened instantly, and the chill in her eyes was sharp enough to pierce through someone and pin them to the wall. Without saying a word, she stormed up to me and slapped me hard, twice, one on each cheek, gritting her teeth as she cursed. You hit him once, I'll hit you twice. You deserve double. Let this be a lesson to you today. See if you ever dare again. I was stunned. Covering my face, I looked up at her. A cold frost coating my gaze. This was the woman I had cared about for 2 lifetimes, yet she didn't even ask a single question. She always stood on the opposite side of me. I once waited all night in the snow just to get her a piece of floral cloth she liked. Now, for the sake of one lie from her lover, she slapped me twice without hesitation. Just then, a bystander down the corridor who couldn't stand to watch anymore spoke up. He's got a bad leg. Who could he even hit? That guy is clearly lying. I saw everything myself. Hearing this, a trace of doubt flashed in Alicia's eyes as she looked at Makoto. Makoto shot the person a threatening glare, then turned back and continued acting pitiful. Alicia, He's just pretending to be weak to get your sympathy. He might even use this as a chance to ask Uncle Lou and Auntie Lou for your hand in marriage." As soon as Alicia heard that, the slight softness in her expression vanished, replaced by even more frost. "Don't even think about it. There will never be anything between us." With those words, she didn't wait for my response. She grabbed Makoto and hurried toward the surgery wing. Out of her line of sight, Makoto raised his hand and gave a triumphant victory sign. I was left standing alone in the desolate hallway, the wind whipping around me. The veins on my hands gripping the cane bulged as if I might crush the wood. That afternoon, my uncle came to pick me up. When he saw the redness on my face, he frowned and asked, "Who hit you?" "Just 2 rabid dogs. It's nothing, uncle. Enduring it is temporary. One day, they'll pay back every bit of what they owe me." Seeing the calm and steady look on my face, my uncle understood. He didn't plan to interfere. His nephew had always been level-headed. The only mistake he'd made was falling for the Lou family's second daughter, and he had suffered plenty for it. But now, that was finally behind him. My uncle nodded in relief, helped me into the back seat, and rode the bike toward the courtyard compound. It was near dusk, almost 6 o'clock. Snowflakes were starting to fall again. My uncle had just returned from grocery shopping when he mysteriously stepped into the bedroom, unable to hide the joy on his face. "Guess who I brought over? Willow rushed here even before you got home." As he turned around, a tall, elegant figure came into view. Willow's delicate face was lit with a smile. A thin layer of snow clung to her shoulders. Even though she tried to hide it, her eyes and brows betrayed a touch of shyness. After 2 lifetimes, seeing her again stirred something in me. I had 1,000 things I wanted to say, but in the moment, not a single word came out. I could only dumbly ask, "Hey, are you cold?" My uncle rolled his eyes at me and quickly found an excuse to leave us alone. "Does your injury still hurt? Have you eaten yet?" We spoke at the same time. Our eyes met, and a sudden tension filled the air, both of us a little embarrassed. In the end, I braced myself and asked the question buried deep in my heart. "Why did you agree to the engagement?" Chapter 8. Willow clearly hadn't expected my question. She froze for a second, then smiled and asked in return, "Why wouldn't I say yes? You're such a good person, but right now, I'm just a driver. And you?" Willow shook her head with a smile and leaned in slightly, speaking seriously. "George, there's nothing wrong with being a driver. It's a skilled trade too. Besides, you're not going to be a driver forever. I believe in you." I was a little stunned, but Willow's eyes were filled with such sincere conviction. "You saved someone from drowning at age 10. By 18, you'd already become the youngest driver in the supply cooperative, and you took on all of Uncle Wang's medical bills by yourself. You're more capable than most people." Her voice wasn't loud, yet it sank straight into my heart, stirring it restlessly. My heartbeat thudded like a drum. That night, we talked for a long time. It wasn't until the sky turned deep and dark that Willow, cheeks flushed with shyness, finally left, but not before saying 2 things. First, leave the matter with the police station to me. Don't worry about it. Second, come to my house for dinner tomorrow. My parents want to talk to you. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, too excited to sleep until very late. Meanwhile, in the Lou family courtyard, Alicia was getting chewed out by her parents for repeatedly asking about the engagement party. "Why do you keep asking? What's wrong with George? He's more than good enough for you. Are you blind?" Getting scolded for no reason made Alicia even angrier the more she thought about it. George might be a useless cripple, but at least he was good to her. But how could a respectable doctor like her marry a driver? What would her friends think? How could she still hold her head high in her social circle? The thought made her mind wander to Makoto. He was also a doctor, and the top scorer in the college entrance exam. Now that's something she could brag about. Of course her parents would approve of him. With that, her anger slowly faded. By the time Willow got home, Alicia was already fast asleep, dreaming peacefully. The next morning, I dressed neatly and, along with my uncle and a bundle of gifts, went to the Lou family home. Uncle and Aunt Lou welcomed us at the door. During the meal, Willow sat next to me, constantly adding food to my plate and urging me to eat more. We chatted and laughed. Alicia sat off to the side, watching with a sour expression. She shot me a glare and hissed under her breath in frustration. "Don't think you can seduce my sister. She'll never fall for you." I turned my head away like I hadn't heard her at all. Alicia, stewing in anger, finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She jumped up, pointed at me, and shouted, completely ignoring her surroundings, "Nice move, George, playing hard to get now. You're just trying to force me to say yes, aren't you?" The moment she spoke, Uncle Lou's expression turned cold. "Watch your mouth. Where are your manners?" Then he turned to me with a warm smile. "George, let's go ahead and settle the engagement between our families. From now on, you two should build a good life together." Just as Alicia was about to object, commotion sounded outside the door. Makoto walked in with his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Wang, both carrying extravagant gifts. As Aunt Lou was about to ask what was going on, Makoto stepped past his parents and spoke up with a beaming smile. Uncle Lou, Aunt Lou, I'm here today to formally propose to Alicia. We're truly in love, please let her marry me. I'm also this year's top scorer in the National College Entrance Exam. If we marry now, it'll be a double blessing. It'll bring honor and prestige to the Lou family. Mr. and Mrs. Wang looked around the room with smug pride, noses in the air. Uncle and Aunt Lou exchanged confused glances. Alicia turned to me with a triumphant smile, her voice shrill with gloating. I told you not to show up and embarrass yourself, but you just wouldn't listen. Now look, face slapped. Hard. How can your dumb brain even compare to Makoto's? Honestly, you're ridiculous. I'm ashamed for you. Willow was about to speak, but I stopped her. In this life, I had never wanted to marry Alicia. I had never wanted to compete with Makoto. In fact, I didn't even want to waste spit talking to either of them. Seeing me remain silent, Makoto assumed I was ashamed and pounded his chest confidently. Don't worry, George. When you take the exam again, I'll personally tutor you, as a favor, you know. Since we're neighbors in the same alley. His parents beamed with pride at how mature and generous their son was. Just then, an official from the local examination office burst into the room, waving a sealed envelope in his hand. Smiling from ear to ear, he exclaimed, "Congratulations, congratulations, Uncle Lou, you really are blessed. The top scorer came to your home to propose today. It's truly a day of double joy." Uncle Lou looked at me, then at Makoto, uncertain, and asked, "The top scorer, who is it?" The official was just about to answer when Mr. Wang impatiently cut him off. "We're dying of suspense here, just get to it already and announce the name." Makoto and Alicia had their eyes glued to the envelope, grinning with anticipation. Willow and I, on the other hand, remained calm, as if the result had nothing to do with us. Unable to delay further, the official opened the envelope and pulled out the red card. He read aloud in a booming voice, "This year's top scorer in Beijing's Suburban District College Entrance Exam, George Wang." Chapter 9. As soon as the name was announced, the expressions of the Wang family changed drastically, their faces turning to stone on the spot. Alicia even lunged forward, snatching the card from the official's hand and reading it out loud, one syllable at a time. George. The next second, the card slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floor. She stood there, completely hollowed out, like her soul had been yanked from her body. Her lips trembled with disbelief as she muttered, "How is this possible? No way. This can't be right. Something must be wrong." She grabbed the official's arm in a frenzy, shaking it violently and shouting incoherently, "You must have tampered with the results somehow. Makoto was supposed to be the top scorer. How could it be George? You must have rigged it." At that moment, the Wang parents also snapped out of their daze. Hearing Alicia's accusation, they jumped in to back her up. "That's right. This has to be your doing. Our son was specially recruited by the hospital. Topping the exam should have been easy. Spit it out already. Confess what you did, or we'll report you." The two officials almost laughed out loud in disbelief. Glancing around the room, now packed with neighbors from all around the compound, they raised their voices and declared, "First, let everyone here bear witness, the envelope was opened publicly, in full view. There's no way it could have been faked. Second, we never once said Makoto was the top scorer, just because you all claimed it doesn't make it true. After all, the title of top scorer is earned by grades, not by gossip." The moment those words landed, the neighbors started nodding in agreement. Some who had long disliked the Wang family even began mocking them outright. Oh ho, who was it just now going on and on about being the top scorer and bringing double happiness? No shame at all. Got into the hospital through backdoor connections and still acts like a king around the courtyard. Our George is the real deal, didn't say a word. Then BAM. Top scorer, way better than those loudmouths. Everyone in the room knew what those remarks really meant. One by one, they laughed and chimed in. Makoto, who was always the one mocking others, now found himself publicly humiliated. His earlier pride and arrogance were completely gone. His face went from pale to flushed in seconds. Meanwhile, his parents wouldn't let up. They angrily questioned the officials again. "You said before that the top scorer's last name was Wang, now you're denying it." The officials shook their heads with a sigh, clearly exhausted. One of them explained patiently, "The name came from higher up. Yes, we said the top scorer's surname was Wang, but we never said it was your son. There are other families in this compound with the surname Wang, you know. Who said the top scorer had to be your Makoto?" The Wang couple were left speechless. They couldn't come up with a single rebuttal. Seeing their livid faces, the crowd around them burst into another round of laughter. Only Alicia stood there, her eyes red and bulging, staring at George like she was possessed. She just couldn't wrap her head around how he, George, could possibly be the top scorer. And yet, there he stood, calm and composed, without the slightest trace of arrogance. That steady, grounded presence stood in stark contrast to Makoto's earlier cocky bravado. The difference was obvious. Even the official was impressed by my composure. He walked over and gave me a friendly pat on the shoulder, teasing. Nicely done. You've made the whole compound proud. Though I kept my cool on the outside, like an immovable rock. My heart was pounding with joy. I really hadn't expected to get the top score. Thinking about it now, I could only chalk it up to good fortune, maybe the luck of living life a second time. With that in mind, I gave a modest shake of the head and replied, "Just lucky, that's all." This made the official like me even more. He proceeded to explain the next steps in detail. Tomorrow, bring your ID to the exam office to claim your prize. You'll get 20,000 yuan, plus, you can choose any major and any university you want. The moment he finished, the entire room gasped. Not a single household in the compound had ever seen that kind of money. And now, just by being the top scorer, I was about to receive 20,000 yuan, a fortune. Neighbors began whispering among themselves, eyes filled with admiration. The Wang parents' faces turned even darker. All of this played out in front of Makoto, whose face was burning red. His fists clenched so tight they nearly cracked. In the shadowy corner where no one could see, his eyes glinted with pure venom. Just before leaving, he stormed past me and deliberately bumped into my shoulder. He shot me a vicious look and spat. "Even if you're the top scorer now, Alicia will never marry you." Chapter 10. I ignored him. Honestly, talking to him felt like trying to speak a language he didn't understand. I had made it clear in multiple situations, I was never going to marry Alicia, but they just refused to listen. Now I was tired of explaining. Let them think whatever they wanted. Once the engagement banquet was held, everything would come to light. That thought comforted me. Before long, the crowd left the Liu household. Uncle and Aunt Liu, along with Willow, went outside to see them off. Only Alicia remained slumped in her chair, like someone had broken her spine, completely drained of energy. George had not only become the top scorer in the college entrance exam, he was now part of a wealthy household with over 10,000 yuan, and he even had the freedom to choose any major and university he wanted. It sounded like a dream, but when she pinched herself, the pain was real. If she had married him, not only would she have the district's top scorer as her fiancé, but she'd instantly join a wealthy family, news that would spread across all of suburban Beijing. The doctors and nurses at the hospital would envy her endlessly. At that thought, she suddenly remembered everything she had done to George not long ago, even helping Makoto forge fake evidence to frame him. He must have been heartbroken. Alicia bit her lip, frowning slightly in thought, but when her eyes swept past the betrothal gifts George had brought, that small flicker of guilt and unease was quickly buried. He brought engagement gifts, he obviously still wanted to marry her. See, she thought, with her charm, what man could truly let her go? That realization made the pallor in her face slowly fade, replaced by a cheerful and beaming smile. When Willow came back into the main room, Alicia even praised. For once in her life, George really turned out to be something. Mom and Dad had great instincts after all. Our Liu family's finally getting some glory again. She even hummed a tune as she stood before the gifts, admiring them from every angle. Willow looked at her, puzzled. Just a moment ago, she'd been acting like the sky was falling. Now she was all smiles. But since the two sisters had never really gotten along, Willow simply sighed and returned to her own room. The next day, my uncle took me to the exam office to complete the formalities. The moment I stepped inside, the staff greeted me with tea and a warm welcome, flustering me to the point of turning bright red. At the final step, while I was signing documents, one of the staff asked, "And your family member's name is?" Just as I was about to reply, a female voice chimed in beside me. "Ah, I'm here. His family member is Alicia." I looked up to see Alicia standing gracefully before me. I glanced behind her, there was no one else. The joy on my face faded instantly. Inch by inch, I immediately corrected. "Excuse me, I'm not married yet. I don't have any family members listed at the moment." Alicia's face faltered for a second, but she quickly bit her lip and added, "We're about to get married. I am his family." The staff member's expression darkened at once. "Miss, if you're not married, you're not family. Pushing yourself in doesn't change that. Don't make trouble. Can't you see George is still standing here on a cane?" Alicia's face turned bright red. Her wide almond-shaped eyes stared at me, silently pleading for me to say something to explain. In the past, I would have immediately stepped forward, comforted her gently, and stood by her side. But now, I saw her embarrassment and helplessness with complete clarity, and said nothing. Seeing I remained silent, Alicia couldn't shamelessly cling to the window counter anymore. She stepped aside awkwardly. The two staff members, still salty from the drama at the Liu household the other day, rolled their eyes at her and said mercilessly, "Some people, when someone's chasing them, they act all high and mighty just because they're young and a little pretty. And now look, once the tables have turned, they're suddenly not good enough anymore." Alicia was never one to swallow insults, and she nearly stepped up to argue, but when she glanced at me, a strange sense of guilt held her back. The words on the tip of her tongue were swallowed down. Half an hour later, all the procedures were complete. Just as the staff member was about to hand me the money envelope and the university selection list, Alicia brazenly reached out to take it first. The staff member was so baffled they almost laughed, rolling their eyes in disbelief. In the end, I simply reached past her, grabbed the bag, and limped toward the door. Alicia stared blankly at my back. He used to cling to her no matter how coldly she treated him. Why was he ignoring her now? This question lingered in her mind, and then escaped her lips. She even rushed forward to block my path, acting like she wouldn't let me leave unless I gave her an answer. I instinctively took a step back, like I was afraid of getting stained by something dirty. I avoided her like the plague. That reflexive motion made Alicia freeze in place. Her face paled, but I acted as if I didn't see her. My brows furrowed, openly showing my impatience. I made it very clear last time, I don't want to see you again. So what's the point of all this pestering now? Alicia's lips tightened, her expression darkening again, but the thought of the engagement gifts back home softened her mood. She forced a coy smile and said in a teasing tone, "You're really something. Huh? Back when you were chasing me, you were bold as ever, and now you're suddenly playing shy." Chapter 11. I've already accepted your proposal. Stop playing hard to get. I know you're mad because I helped Makoto falsify evidence against you before. I promise it won't happen again. I closed my eyes. A wave of exhaustion washed over me. I couldn't help but hate myself for the foolish things I did in the past, things that made Alicia believe I would never want anyone but her. But I'm still human. I have a heart. When someone repeatedly humiliates you, mocks you, and hurts you, it hurts. You cry. But this woman, she never cared. Even now, she still acted like she had every right to behave that way. It was laughable. I turned away and called out toward the front. Moments later, Willow pulled up in her car. The moment Alicia saw her, she frowned in confusion. "Why are you here, sis? Can't you see? I'm here to pick someone up." With that, Willow gently helped me into the car, handling me like I was something precious and fragile. Alicia instantly sensed something was wrong. Her sister had never shown the slightest interest in George. After graduation, she had gone straight into military academy and worked her way up to the rank of major. And for some reason, she'd never dated anyone. Every time she came home, their mom would always nag her about it. But this time, she said nothing. Before Alicia could make sense of it all, Willow had already started the engine and driven off, leaving a trail of exhaust in her face. Alicia coughed a few times, her chest tightening with inexplicable anxiety. Since the other day, George had started to feel like a stranger, like he was drifting further and further away from her. She chuckled bitterly and shook her head, scolding herself for overthinking. That night, Willow didn't return until very late. The moment she walked in, Lou's mom and dad called her into their room. Alicia had been about to sneak over and eavesdrop, but her father turned and shot her a glare, then slammed the door shut so hard the walls shook. Frustrated, Alicia crawled into bed, tossing and turning all night. The next morning at the hospital, she had just finished a few tasks when Makoto showed up. He looked completely worn down, sunken cheeks, dark circles under his eyes, and his sharp cheekbones jutting out from his gaunt face. "You need something?" she asked. "We should keep our distance from now on. If George gets mad at me." Makoto's face immediately darkened. Then, as if remembering something, he smirked casually. "The whole courtyard's buzzing. Didn't you hear? George is getting engaged today." Alicia glared at him with venom. "That's impossible. I've been at the hospital all day. Who would he even get engaged to?" Makoto gave her a mocking glance and leaned in closer, voice dripping with sarcasm. "There are plenty of girls in the neighborhood who doesn't want to marry him now. Alicia, you and I, we're the real match." "You're disgusting," she shouted furiously, but the tips of her fingers, holding a pack of medicine, had started to tremble. A growing unease spread through her chest. The next second, she shoved Makoto aside with a forceful shoulder, didn't even bother grabbing her purse, and rushed straight toward the compound. Along the way, every familiar face she passed was gossiping. "Those two standing together, they're such a perfect match, like a golden couple. I heard the engagement and wedding are being held at the same time." Her heart skipped a beat. She pushed herself faster, running with everything she had toward the Liu house. But when she arrived at the main hall, all she saw was Willow and George, no one else. One was her fiancé, the other was her sister. Her tightly strung nerves loosened at once. All the strength drained from her legs, as if they were filled with lead. She couldn't move another inch. Alicia's mind was a total mess, tangled threads impossible to straighten. It felt like her brain had shut down. And yet, her eyes couldn't look away from them. She didn't know what Willow had said to George, but he immediately turned around and poured her a cup of hot water. When Willow reached for the cup, he refused to hand it over. Instead, he turned away and gently blew on it, trying to cool it down. All that quiet attentiveness, all those thoughtful gestures, they used to be hers. Now, he was giving them to someone else. Alicia squinted, her chest tightening with a dull, persistent ache. But then, Another voice echoed in her mind. That's your older sister. Maybe George was only being kind to her out of affection for you. She tried to convince herself of that, over and over again. But the look of sorrow and helplessness on her face couldn't be hidden. No matter how hard she tried, none of her inner turmoil affected the others in the room. Lou Mom and Dad, in particular, were overjoyed. They walked over to George with tears in their eyes. After a long pause, Lou Dad spoke. His voice choked with emotion. Good boy, we really didn't misjudge you. Your father must be smiling down from heaven. My uncle beamed with joy and grinned as he turned to the Lou couple. I always said Willow was a lucky girl. This time, she's come home to double blessings. The Lou parents nodded enthusiastically, smiling ear to ear. That's right, a double blessing indeed. Just then, Alicia, finally emerging from her fog of confusion, suddenly blurted out, a double blessing. What do you mean by that? Chapter 12. Lou Dad and Lou Mom ignored her completely. Instead, they gently took Willow's hand and placed it in mine, smiling as they said, George, we've watched you grow up. Having you as our son-in-law is something we're truly overjoyed about. Child, Willow's future is in your hands now. We hope your days together will be filled with happiness and prosperity. That moment scorched Alicia's eyes like hot iron tongs. Her mind went blank, and a rush of blood surged wildly through her veins. She stared, stunned, her eyes wide in disbelief as she muttered, George, and my sister. The next second, she shoved past those in front of her, stumbling forward, her voice tight and trembling. What do you mean? What's going on between George and my sister? Lou Dad gave her an impatient glare and snapped. What are you shouting about? Your sister and George are in love. They'll be holding the engagement banquet soon. From now on, you better call him brother-in-law. The moment the words in love and brother-in-law hit her ears, Alicia's face went deathly pale, like a thunderclap had exploded right above her head. She stood there dazed, soul shattered, heart trembling uncontrollably. Her eyes scanned their joined hands and the affectionate way they looked at each other. Each glance, each word, felt like a whip cracking across her face, burning hot and merciless. Humiliated and furious, she shouted back, how could they be in love? George clearly likes Alicia. Willow's gaze turned dark and cold. The soft, gentle smile from earlier had completely vanished, replaced by a cutting, icy sharpness. Alicia had never feared anything or anyone growing up, except for this unwavering, no-nonsense older sister. Her lips trembled as she clamped them shut, biting down hard, anger radiating from her even as she dared not speak again. But when her eyes fell on George and Willow's hands, fingers interlocked tightly, a surge of rage burst inside her. She could no longer sit still. She stormed over to George, flinging accusations in his face without a second thought. I already agreed to your proposal. What more do you want? And now you're seducing my sister. You're disgusting. Slap. Willow stepped forward and gave Alicia a fierce slap, leaving her stunned in place. The living room fell into a heavy, awkward silence. But Alicia's mind had already spiraled into chaos. She was consumed by one thought. The top scorer was supposed to be her future husband. She couldn't accept it, wouldn't accept it. He had always liked her. He followed her around for years. How could he suddenly say he wouldn't marry her? She wouldn't allow it. She wouldn't agree to it. Fueled by this madness, she ignored the pain on her face and charged toward me again. Her expression twisted with desperation. George, I told everyone, as long as you became the top scorer, I'd marry you. Now you did it. Whatever they just said, it's all a lie. Right, the one you want to marry is still me. Right. The room was frozen. Everyone exchanged stunned glances. The air grew thick and suffocating. Alicia stared at me with burning intensity, fully convinced that as long as she accepted me, I would still choose her. It had never crossed her mind that one day, because of her coldness, I would walk away, that I would choose someone else. Willow was about to speak, but I gently reached out to stop her. I gave her a warm smile, like a whisper, assuring her it was fine. Then I turned back toward Alicia, my face cold, my voice even colder. Word by word, I said, a worthless cripple like me, just a lowly driver, I was never good enough for you, not even fit to polish your shoes. Those were your words, in front of everyone. Did you forget? I didn't. From beginning to end, I've only ever planned to marry Willow, never you. With every word, Alicia's face lost another shade of color, until all the blood drained out and she looked as pale as death. It felt like a hole had opened up in her chest, wide and empty, the cold wind howling through it. After a long pause, her lips finally trembled. She tried to speak, tried to explain, but the look in my eyes, that cold, unfeeling stare, left her completely speechless. Her throat felt choked, like a boulder was lodged inside it. Panic welled up in her chest. Terrified, she reached out and grabbed my sleeve, her voice trembling. But you clearly liked me. I shook her off without even looking up and replied flatly, don't worry, I don't anymore. And as if that wasn't enough, I added, from now on, and for the rest of my life, the only person I will ever love is Willow. Still not done. I turned to the crowd, took Willow's hand in mine, and declared loudly, "Everyone here, friends, neighbors, be my witnesses today. In this lifetime, aside from Willow, I want no one else." Chapter 13. Every word struck Alicia's heart like a 1,000-pound hammer, crushing her from the inside. The pain was so overwhelming. She could barely stay on her feet. The woman who had always held her head high now looked pitiful, with regret flooding her tear-filled eyes. But I acted like I didn't see any of it. Still holding Willow's hand, I walked straight past Alicia and out the door. The onlookers, rarely getting the chance to see Alicia being put in her place, took the opportunity to stir the pot. See that? She totally had it coming. Looked down on George from the start. Now she wants to come crawling back. Too bad he doesn't want her anymore. If it were me, I'd choose the older Lou daughter too. She's a good person and a military major. Compared to the second Lou girl, they're worlds apart. Exactly. All right, that's enough. Lou uncle and aunt are already furious. Right at that moment, Makoto walked in with his parents, the Wong couple. Seeing them, Lou dad and mom looked like they'd just seen their saving grace. They quickly stood up, raised their hands, and spoke to the crowd. "Everyone, there's still a happy event going on at the Lou household today. Please, let's all show a little respect and spare us some dignity." The neighbors got the hint. With the host speaking and the Wong family showing up again, they all quieted down, waiting to see what would happen next. The atmosphere in the Lou family's main hall turned heavy. Wasting no time, the Wong couple stated their intention clearly. They had come to formally propose marriage between their son Makoto and Alicia. Lou mom and dad exchanged a glance and sighed quietly before Lou dad began. "Our older daughter is getting engaged and married to George at the same time. If you don't mind, maybe we can arrange for Makoto and Alicia's wedding to be held." Before he could finish, Alicia, eyes red and burning, suddenly rushed forward and cut him off. "I don't agree. The man I want to marry is Juan." She didn't even get the name out before Lou dad's eyes went bloodshot and his hand flew up high. Slap. It was a heavy slap, so hard that his palm went numb afterward. When Alicia looked back up, there was blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. Lou mom and another older woman forcefully dragged her back to her room. Their rough, calloused hands covered her mouth, muffling her cries. Even though she struggled violently, they didn't let go. Lou dad turned a blind eye to the scene, pretending not to see a thing. He quickly finalized the engagement with the Wong family. Since there were few auspicious dates after the new year, both families agreed to hold the wedding on the same day as Willow's. That night, Lou dad and mom broke the news to Alicia. They didn't sugarcoat anything. "You've been too close to Makoto for years. Everyone in this courtyard knows it. Now you say you don't want to marry him, with your reputation in ruins. No decent man will take you." Upon hearing this, Alicia flew into a rage. She smashed the teacup on her bedside table and screamed hoarsely, "I'm not marrying him. If I marry anyone, it'll be George. He and I grew up together. We were childhood sweethearts." Before she could finish speaking, Lou dad let out a cold snort. His eyes filled with scorn as he snapped, "Give it a rest. Back when George was chasing after you and even came to propose, did you say yes? Every time we brought it up, you'd pull a long face, always going on and on about Makoto, how rich his family is, how you two work together and speak the same language. Well, now you've got what you wanted, so why are you throwing a tantrum at home now?" Alicia was stunned into silence. For a long moment, she couldn't come up with a single rebuttal. All she could do was cover her face with both hands, shoulders trembling as she sobbed. Even after Lou dad and mom left the room, Alicia's crying didn't stop. She couldn't understand. George had clearly liked her for so long. Why had he suddenly turned around and proposed to her sister? The thought of the two of them married, her sister becoming a rich woman overnight, the wife of the top scorer, it felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Fueled by spite, she pounded her fists into the pillow again and again, trying to vent all the bitterness and rage building inside her. She replayed everything that had happened recently, piecing it together in her mind. Eventually, her fists slowed, her eyes burned, and under her breath, she repeated the same sentence over and over. "It's all Makoto's fault, all because of him. If it hadn't been for his scheming and manipulation, how could she and George have grown so distant?" Once she'd finally figured it all out, the weight on her chest lifted, at least a little. So what if they were engaged? It wasn't the same as being married. There was still time. She would find a way to win George's heart back. She bit into her steamed bun like it was her enemy, chewing hard with a glint in her eyes as dozens of plans raced through her mind. Once she made up her mind, she wiped her face and crawled under the covers to rest. The next morning, she was already waiting outside the hospital's orthopedic wing. The cold wind whipped against her, making her shiver and stomp her feet to keep warm. She suddenly remembered a winter morning from years ago. George had ridden his bike all the way to a town several miles away just to buy her favorite soup dumplings. When he got back, his body was covered in snow and his face was frozen blue. And yet, she had taken those dumplings he bought with freezing hands and shared them with Makoto. She bit her lip hard. Regret began to rise in her chest. But over the years, things like this had happened far too many times to count. Alicia took a deep breath, forcing herself not to dwell on it. Her eyes stayed locked on the entrance. Not long after, my uncle and I arrived at the hospital gate. The moment she saw us, she rushed down to offer support. I immediately shifted away from her and scoffed coldly. Thanks, but I don't need your fake kindness. Alicia felt a strange wave of grievance rise in her chest, but she forced a smile and tried to play it cool. I'm on shift today. I was waiting specifically to help you get your cast done. I turned to my uncle and said flatly, Uncle, let's go. We're switching hospitals. Alicia panicked. She'd waited so long, she couldn't let him leave. She quickly stepped forward and asked, You're already here, why switch hospitals? Have I not made myself clear enough? Seeing you disgusts me. If you so much as touch me, I feel filthy. Chapter 14. The moment those words left my mouth, Alicia's face went pale, as white as the snow on the street. My uncle pressed his lips together, clearly holding back a smirk. Still, he offered a polite suggestion. The roads are icy. Let's not walk too far. What if someone slips and falls? Alicia's eyes lit up at that. She nodded quickly, even casting a grateful look toward my uncle. But what he said next turned that gratitude into a cruel joke. If you don't want her around, just find another doctor. There's no shortage of surgeons in this hospital. With that, he didn't even glance her way as he helped me into the corridor. Alicia bit down so hard she nearly cracked a tooth. But when she remembered all the things she'd done in the past, she could only swallow her frustration and chase after us. By the time she caught up to the ward, another doctor was already wrapping the cast around my leg. We were all familiar faces. When the doctor saw Alicia walk in, he didn't hold back and teased casually, What's this? Couldn't bear to let your brother-in-law out of your sight, so you followed him here. Don't worry, I've handled all your brother-in-law's casts before. That repeated brother-in-law rang like sharp needles in Alicia's ears, stabbing deep into her eardrums. For a moment, she was completely speechless. I didn't even look at her. I just chatted with the doctor like nothing happened. My uncle, watching this scene, wore a sarcastic smirk and said loudly, Some girls are really something. When someone's nice to them, they don't want it. But when they get rejected, they come crawling right back. Honestly, the doctor glanced up and added, Pathetic. Really? But people like that, pretty common these days. My uncle chuckled without denying it. Your hospital seems to have a fair number of them. The two exchanged a knowing laugh. I saw it all, smiled quietly, but said nothing. Alicia stood frozen in place, completely at a loss. She never imagined there would come a day when George, her George, would just stand there, watching others insult her and say nothing. He used to fight anyone who dared call her names, even over a single brat. But now, he let people mock her to her face, even calling her cheap. Her heart sank, like the icy wind outside had seeped into her bones, chilling her so much she couldn't speak, couldn't even find the strength to protest. The doctor was quick and skilled. Bandage after bandage, he wrapped everything neatly and tied it off. As soon as he was done, Alicia rushed forward, trying to support me, but I blocked her with one hand. No need. I can walk by myself. My tone was calm, but the cold gleam in my eyes was harsher than the snowstorm outside. After being repeatedly rejected and humiliated, Alicia finally snapped. She shoved a chair aside, voice shaking with rage as she shouted, What is your problem? What did I ever do to you for you to hate me this much? Even if you're going to be my brother-in-law, you don't have to look down on me like I'm trash. I laughed suddenly and slowly turned to face her, sarcasm gleaming in my eyes. Oh, that's too much for you. Can't take it. The humiliation you all put me through back then, this is just a tiny fraction of it. Alicia panicked. She opened her mouth to explain, but I cut her off immediately. I pointed at the corridor in front of me, my eyes dark and sharp as I asked word by word, Do you remember? Right here in this hallway, when you slapped me twice over Makoto's false accusations. Alicia, you might have forgotten, but I haven't. She tried to step forward and explain, but I shoved past her. We're leaving. Anyone who doesn't know how to get out of the way, move now. As I passed her, I shot her a look of pure contempt. Then I turned to the doctor and gave him a warm smile of gratitude. Kindness and respect for others, only scorn and disgust for her. The contrast couldn't have been clearer, but even after everything, Alicia didn't give up. In her mind, I was just throwing a tantrum. Once I cooled off, I'd forgive her again. I didn't tell Willow about Alicia following me around. First, I didn't want to put her in an awkward position as the older sister. Second, I'd already chosen my major and university. I'd be leaving suburban Beijing soon. That day, Willow came to see me with a bright smile. She held a beautifully wrapped, high-end gift box in her hands. My uncle, sensing the young couple wanted some private time, gave us a knowing nod and stepped out for a chat with the neighbors. I'm heading back to the military base tomorrow. When I get some time off, I'll come visit. This is a gift for you. She opened the box and handed it to me. Inside was a brand new men's wristwatch, sleek and expensive. I was stunned. It took me a few seconds before I shook my head, refusing gently. This is too much. I can't accept it. Willow gave me a playful glare, clearly pretending to be angry. Without a word, she took the watch out and put it on my wrist herself. Then she added softly, to me, nothing is more valuable than you. Chapter 15. It was the first time someone had ever confessed to me. I felt my face heat up, though it didn't show much, but my ears turned bright red. Looking at the watch on my wrist, I hesitantly asked, "Why are you so good to me?" Willow burst into laughter. Her eyes curved into crescents. "Because you're my man. If I'm not good to you, who else would I be good to?" She paused for a moment, then asked meaningfully, "Do you still remember the little girl you saved from the pond when we were kids?" I nodded slowly. Looking at her smiling face, a realization suddenly hit me. That girl was you. It was me. I frowned slightly, confused. "Wasn't that your sister, Alicia?" I remember she was wearing a floral padded jacket that day. Willow took my hand, led me to the couch, and explained. The jacket was hers, but the one who fell in the water, the one you rescued, was me. That day she cried and begged to wear my new jacket, so we swapped. I believed her. Everyone in the courtyard knew Willow had always been the kind sister who let her younger sister have everything. Thinking of that, I gave her a side glance, feeling a little wronged. "Why didn't you tell me back then? I always thought I saved Alicia, so I spent all those years protecting her." Willow squeezed my hand a little tighter but didn't say the words she almost let slip. "I thought you liked her, so I never said anything, but it didn't matter now." After all the detours, he still came back to her. After Willow left, Alicia became even more blatant about running to my house. Day or night, she came around constantly, irritating both me and my uncle. But out of respect for Uncle Lou and Aunt Lou, we didn't kick up a fuss. Still, it didn't take long before the neighbors started gossiping. Has the Lou family's second daughter been possessed or something? Always running to George's house, doesn't she feel shame? Shame, please. After that whole thing with Makoto, she's already a joke. Ugh, poor Lou family. Their heads must be turning gray with stress. Before the gossip faded, Alicia came again, bundled in a thick cotton coat and a bright red scarf, knocking hard on my window. But unlike before, this time she knocked dozens of times, and no one responded. A nosy aunt, after watching the scene long enough, finally said, "Stop knocking. George and his uncle are gone." Alicia's face changed instantly. She rushed to ask, "Where did they go?" The aunt rolled her eyes. "You ask me. Who am I? Their doorkeeper." With that, she slammed her door shut. Now, only Alicia stood alone in the cold courtyard, surrounded by snow and silence, facing the dark, empty house. At that moment, a wave of overwhelming fear surged inside her. All the repressed sorrow, the panic, the loss, crashed down on her like a tidal wave. She ran home, gasping for breath, and anxiously asked her father, "Where's George? Where did he go?" Lou Dad's face darkened. He banged his tobacco pipe hard on the table and snapped, "Watch your mouth. He's your brother-in-law now. Where he goes is none of your business." She turned to her mother with pleading eyes, but Lou Mom was already too disappointed with her disobedience. She didn't respond at all. With no other option, Alicia turned to the dumbest solution. She gathered a few close friends and searched for George together. She looked everywhere: the supply cooperative, the main street, restaurants, even hospitals. She was terrified he'd gotten fed up with her and disappeared for good. The search became her only lifeline. She even stopped going to work at the hospital, taking days off one after another. Makoto watched silently each day as she scrambled to contact people, asking about George. He didn't say a word. He understood clearly. Ever since George became the top scorer, Alicia's attitude toward him had changed. She looked down on him now, chasing after George with everything she had. But Makoto was also sure of one thing: George had been hurt too deeply by her. There was no going back. Once she realized she couldn't find him and gave up, then he and Alicia could get married. In the end, it was the Lou parents who stepped in. They didn't want things to blow up and ruin the family's reputation. So they finally told her the truth. "Stop looking. Your brother-in-law left for school." "Where did he go?" "To your sister's military base, the Northern Military Academy." Chapter 16. Only now did Alicia finally believe it. George truly didn't want to marry her. Not only had he left without saying a word, but he had even chosen a school near Willow's military base, clearly just to be near her. Thinking about it, all the confidence she once had felt like a cruel joke. The frustration and injustice in her chest nearly drove her mad. She wanted to scream, to yell, to let it all out, but in the end, she realized she had no one to blame but herself. He used to treat her so well, and she was the one who drove him away. Tears of regret streamed down her cheeks like a broken dam, scalding her palms and her heart all the same. She pounded her pillow with both fists, wishing she could slap herself unconscious, but it was no use. Time wouldn't rewind. She had truly lost him. Once that reality sank in, Alicia finally broke down and cried her heart out, sobbing until her face was soaked in tears. Outside her door, Lou Mom could only shake her head and sigh, but there was nothing more she could do, just hope that her daughter would come to her senses and move on. What they didn't expect, however, was that the next morning when they called Alicia down for breakfast, her room was empty, and a few of her clothes were missing. At that very moment, Alicia was boarding a northbound train. She'd thought about it all night. She couldn't give up on George, no matter what. She had to find him. Meanwhile, I was standing outside the military base, holding a box of gifts, waiting for Willow to come pick me up. I hadn't told her beforehand that I was transferring to the same city as her. I wanted to surprise her. When school finally let out for break, I carefully picked a gift and brought it with me, eyes full of anticipation. Before long, Willow passed by the training grounds in uniform, leading a group of recruits. She headed straight into the dormitory. "Have you eaten? How have you been lately?" We asked the same question at the same time. Our eyes met, and quickly looked away. Both of us blushed. Seeing her shy expression, I was moved. I quickly pulled a small gift box from my pocket and handed it to her. Willow opened it to find a simple, elegant silver ring. Her face lit up with joy. She was about to slip it onto her finger when I quickly stopped her. "Wait, that's my job." I took the ring, gently held her hand, and slowly slid it on. But my eyes couldn't help noticing the thick calluses on her palms. Just as I was about to take a closer look, Willow quickly pulled her hand back. There was a hint of awkwardness in her voice. "Don't look, all the training made them rough. They're not pretty." I scolded her playfully. "Nonsense. These are your badges of honor as a soldier. Who says they're not beautiful?" As I said that, I placed her hand over my heart. My eyes softened with affection, so much that it made her eyes turn red with shyness. Just then, the dorm's landline rang. Willow picked it up, and after a moment, her expression turned odd. "What's wrong?" I asked. "My sister's here." About 10 minutes later, Alicia arrived at the dorm. The moment she saw me, her eyes turned red, and she threw herself at me, but I reacted quickly and stepped aside. When she tried to pull the same stunt again, Willow arrived just in time and snapped, "Try one more thing, and I'll send you back myself." Only then did Alicia settle down, finally behaving herself, but her eyes never left our interlocked hands, filled with resentment. But she didn't dare say a word. I was just as uncomfortable with her sudden appearance. What shocked me even more was how much she'd changed in just a month. Gone was the vibrant, modern young woman she used to be. Now, she was skinny, with sunken eyes and sharp cheekbones. The phone rang again. Willow picked it up, then turned to me with an apologetic smile. "My commanding officer is calling for me. I'll be back soon." Before leaving, she shot Alicia a cold glare. "Don't try anything. If you do, I'll have you escorted home." Alicia knew her sister well. She never said anything she wouldn't follow through on. Reluctantly, she nodded. After Willow left, only Alicia and I remained in the room. The air instantly turned heavy. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice laced with cool indifference. Alicia had 1,000 things she wanted to say, but now that she was face to face with me, she didn't know where to begin. She just stared, silently. Since she wouldn't speak, I didn't bother either. I stepped around her, ready to leave. As we brushed shoulders, I heard her trembling voice. "George, don't go. Let's talk." I wanted to say there was nothing to talk about, but then I thought, maybe it was better to get it all out now. This endless back and forth wasn't healthy, and Willow shouldn't be caught in the middle. Like a host offering tea to a guest, I handed her a cup and said, "This time, I hope we can talk it through once and for all. George, I was wrong before. I want to apologize." Chapter 17. It was my fault for not cherishing you before. I realize that now. Can you? No. I cut her off coldly. There's no point in bringing up the past. Not loving someone isn't a crime. You and Makoto are a good match. I wish you both the best. Alicia grew more anxious. This wasn't the outcome she wanted. She blurted out, "That's not true. I don't like him. The one I've always liked is you." I froze for a second, then laughed. "What?" Alicia seized the chance to explain. "George, it's you I like. I just didn't know it myself until you got engaged to my sister. That's when I finally understood my feelings. I was foolish before. Please forgive me." "Okay, I can cancel the engagement with Makoto." My expression twisted in disbelief. "So what you're saying is, you now realize the one you like isn't Makoto but me, and that's why you came running here to your sister?" "Yes." "George, I know I hurt you. Can you give me a chance to make it right?" Her eyes were filled with longing, but to me it sounded like a bad joke. I curled my lips in mockery and said, "But Alicia, I realized the person I like isn't you. It's Willow." My feelings had long been worn away by all the cold sarcasm, the humiliation, and indifference. That honest declaration shattered all of Alicia's hopes. Her mind kept echoing with one line, "The one I like isn't you, it's Willow." How could he say something so cruel? The man who used to love her so much, how could he stop just like that? She staggered back, as if every part of her body was screaming in pain. When Willow came back, Alicia looked absolutely pale, concerned. Willow handed her a cup of warm water and asked, "Are you okay?" But seeing her sister's face only made Alicia think of George's words. Her heart twisted in agony. She forced a smile and said she was fine. Willow checked her forehead and, seeing there was no fever, left to attend to her duties. By noon, it began to snow. The ground outside was already covered with a thick white layer. Walking on it made a soft crunching sha-sha sound. Some areas had frozen over. Willow walked carefully ahead, but still nearly slipped and fell. I rushed forward to steady her. Alicia, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. She slipped hard onto the ice, bruising her knees and back. Her eyes welled with tears, but I didn't even glance her way. I was too busy fussing over Willow. In the end, it was Willow who turned back to pull her up, letting her barely stand straight again. Alicia felt like her heart was being sliced open, shredded into pieces so small she could barely breathe. Lost in thought, she slipped again, and it was Willow who reached out to catch her. "What are you thinking about?" What she was thinking about was the time 2 months ago, when George had been called to the skating rink. She'd conspired with others to publicly humiliate him and cause him to fall. Her own fall just now was excruciating, but that day, he had been shoved twice. He must have been in unbearable pain. Her mind was dazed, thoughts sluggish, eyes locked on George's hand resting on Willow's waist. She stared blankly, like a puppet without a soul or will, trailing behind them. Her eyes were red, fists clenched so tightly she nearly broke her own fingers, but there was nothing she could do. George treated her and Willow completely differently. To Willow, he was all gentle smiles and soft tones. To her, he was cold as ice, visibly disgusted at the sight of her. Even the officers in the base were praising George, how outstanding he was, how top of his class, with a bright future. Whoever married him had struck gold. Hearing all those blessings felt like being stabbed 1,000 times in the heart. She had once had all of that, and she'd thrown it away. Now she had truly lost him. When George looked at her, there was no more love, only chilling indifference, even outright disgust. She had no one else to blame but herself. Every time she thought about it, Alicia wanted to stab herself. Why had she been so blind? She thought of how George once gave her roasted sweet potatoes, and how she'd refused him with a scoff, leaving him looking utterly dejected. How he'd saved up pocket money to buy her new leather shoes, only for her to show no appreciation, his disappointment etched in his face. What had she been doing then? Picking him apart, saying thoughtless things, mocking him. She couldn't even bear to recall the way his heart must have broken, and on top of that, she had openly defended Makoto in front of him, caring for another man right in front of George. The neighbors were right. She really was pathetic. She had mistaken worthless stones for pearls, utterly blind. After dinner, Willow made a phone call home. When she learned that Alicia had run away without permission, she made a decision on the spot. The next morning, she arranged for a car to take Alicia back to the Liu household. That same day, Makoto came by to check on her after hearing the news. But every time he came, Alicia was cold and distant. One day, she even opened the door with a frosty face and told him to get lost. Makoto, who had never been treated that way before, finally snapped. Furious, he lashed out. "What are you acting all high and mighty for? If your sister weren't a major in the military, do you think I'd even want you?" Chapter 18. As soon as she heard those words, Alicia's face turned red with rage. She snapped back immediately. "Then break off the engagement. You think I want to marry you? Why don't you take a good look in the mirror? You're nothing compared to George, not even fit to shine his shoes. If it weren't for you, how would I have ended up separated from him?" Alicia roared with fury, her eyes burning with fire. All the frustration, the grievance, the fury that had built up over time exploded like a firestorm, burning her last shred of rationality. But Makoto wasn't angered by her insults. On the contrary, he sat down calmly and took a sip of tea, a mocking smirk tugging at his lips. "So what if I'm not as good as him? You're still going to end up with me. It was your stupidity and greed that drove him away. You keep calling everyone else shameless, but really, you're the shameless one." That line struck a nerve. Alicia saw red. She grabbed the chair next to the bed and hurled it straight at him. Thankfully, Makoto dodged in time, otherwise it would have drawn blood on the spot. The loud crash drew Liu Dad and Liu Mom from the main room. Seeing the two fighting, Liu Dad could only step in and ask Makoto to leave so both sides could cool off. Having taken an unexplained leave from work for months, Alicia had already annoyed hospital leadership. A single phone call came to the Liu household. The message was cold and clear. "If Alicia doesn't return to work tomorrow, tell her not to bother coming back at all." Before Alicia could explain, the call was cut off. That was the wake-up call she needed. She had already lost George. She couldn't afford to lose this respectable job too, or she'd truly become the butt of the neighborhood's jokes. Depressed but determined, Alicia tidied herself up and reported to work on time the next day. No sooner had she sat down than her colleague Sophia glanced at her sympathetically and said, "If you hadn't shown up today, this spot wouldn't have been yours anymore." Alicia blinked, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Sophia looked around to make sure no one was near, then leaned in and whispered, "That intern doctor from surgery, Maria, not only does she want your job, she wants your fiancé too. Just a few days ago, someone saw them together in a hospital room." Alicia's pupils shrank in disbelief. She shot up and went looking for them. She stormed toward Makoto's office, but it was empty. Just as she was about to leave, she heard muffled grunting from the on-call room nearby. Turning back, she approached, and saw a sight she'd never forget for the rest of her life. Through the gap in the door, Makoto was completely naked, his body pressed on top of a pale-skinned woman. Their movements weren't visible, but the woman's bouncing chest said it all. A wave of nausea swept through Alicia's gut. She clutched her mouth, nearly vomiting. But in that instant, a plan flashed through her mind. She reached for the door, locked it with a click, and shouted at the top of her lungs, "Help! Someone! Caught in the act! Help!" It was around 9 or 10 in the morning, peak hours at the hospital. The hallway was bustling. Her loud screams drew a flood of people to the door. Inside, Makoto realized things were going south. He tugged hard at the door, trying to open it. Alicia let go of the lock. In a flash, 2 stark naked figures burst out of the room, caught in the act. Gasps filled the corridor. A second later, came the woman's shrieks and the man's curses, echoing across the entire second floor. Without skipping a beat, Alicia stormed forward and slapped both of them across the face. Her eyes reddened as she screamed, "You shameless bastards, sneaking around in my hospital. Do you think I'm dead? Do you even have a shred of humanity left?" Her furious shouting only drew more onlookers. Maria stood naked behind Makoto, trembling uncontrollably. Someone, out of pity, tossed some clothes from behind a chair for the two of them. Once dressed, the pair seemed to regain some backbone. Maria sneered and retorted, "What's the difference? You might as well be dead. You've been chasing George around, why can't I be with Makoto? You don't want him. I do. And for the record, we didn't start this just yesterday." Alicia was stunned. Even after being caught red-handed, this woman dared to talk back. Fury erupted. She lunged forward and slapped her hard again, so hard, blood welled at Maria's lips. Makoto's heart ached at the sight. He jumped between them protectively, face darkening, his rage boiling over. "That's enough. You're allowed to chase other men, but I'm not allowed to have my own fun." Chapter 19. After that, Makoto sneered again and added, "She's not wrong, we've been sleeping together for a while now. You remember the day you slapped George twice for me? We had just finished screwing." The malice in his eyes, along with those vile words, cut into Alicia's soul like a knife. She stared in disbelief, needing confirmation. "You lied to me that day." Makoto nodded smugly, not only confirming but spelling out every detail with sick satisfaction. He even chuckled. "Watching you slap him twice in the face felt so damn good. He didn't even get the chance to explain before you left him with a swollen cheek." Before he could finish basking in his cruelty, Alicia grabbed the chair in front of her and smashed it down with all her strength. Bang! Makoto froze, stunned, then collapsed to the ground like a rag doll. It all happened in a flash. By the time the bystanders reacted, blood was already pooling under his head, and Alicia, completely unhinged, stood over him, muttering, "You lied to me. This is all your fault. Yours." She kept smashing the chair down again and again. Even after Makoto lost consciousness, the onlookers panicked, fearing she'd kill him on the spot. Several people rushed in to separate them. Within moments, the hallway was in chaos. Alicia and Maria were dragged out of the room, while Makoto was rushed to the ER. By noon, the scandal had spread like wildfire across the entire Beijing suburb, and even made the local newspapers. Caught in the act, woman beats fiancé after hospital hookup. Love triangle turns violent, 2 women, 1 man, 1 chair. Medical morals in question after hospital sex scandal. The furious hospital director summoned Alicia to his office and exploded. "What the hell is wrong with you? You just got back and now this. You've destroyed the hospital's reputation. Young people these days have no self-control. Go home and reflect. You're suspended." He waved her off, clearly unwilling to see her any longer. Outside the office, Alicia's face twisted with venom. That disgusting man had ruined her life and dared to mock her face to face. She would make him pay. That afternoon, both the Wang and Liu families gathered in the hospital. Makoto had just been stabilized after emergency treatment, still unconscious. The moment Wang mother saw Alicia, she lunged at her, ready to tear her apart, only to be restrained by Wang father. Though she couldn't fight, her mouth didn't stop. "You filthy whore. If my son hadn't felt sorry for you when George threw you aside, he wouldn't have touched you. And what do? Repay his kindness with violence." Had she not mentioned George, things might have gone differently. But as soon as Alicia heard that name, it was like lighting a fuse. She spat, eyes blazing with hatred. If it weren't for your son stirring shit, how would I have become a laughingstock? And you call that kindness? Screwing another woman behind my back. Like father, like son, your whole damn family is trash. Another explosion of chaos was about to erupt when a nurse rushed to call the hospital director. Fed up, the director showed up and declared in front of everyone, Makoto's actions have severely damaged the hospital's image. He didn't pass the college entrance exams either. Once he recovers, he's fired. Wong's mother panicked. She didn't even have time to continue cursing Alicia before she softened her tone and begged tearfully, "Please, director, give him one more chance." But the director was unmoved. He simply turned and looked at Alicia, still simmering with smugness, and said coldly, "You go write a self-criticism. You're suspended for 3 months. One more incident, and you're gone too." Without waiting for any response, he turned and left. The staff whispered among themselves, some saying Makoto deserved it, others shaking their heads over his lust getting the better of him. After the Liu family left, the room quieted down. Only the sound of Wong's mother's weeping echoed through the ward. Eventually, Makoto stirred and opened his eyes. Seeing his parents, he understood where he was. Wong's father explained everything, the scandal, the media coverage, and the director's decision to fire him. Makoto didn't react. He just let out an abrupt laugh. His strange behavior startled Wong's mother. She wiped her tears quickly. Their only son, he couldn't lose it now. What if this lunatic woman cost them their bloodline? She tried to talk him down. "Makoto, maybe just forget about Alicia. That crazy woman's no good. We'll find you another wife. A decent one." But Makoto didn't seem to hear. He chuckled again. Finally, after a long pause, the smile slowly vanished. A vicious light appeared in his eyes as he said hoarsely, "Mom, don't cancel the engagement. I want her. She hates me, doesn't she? Then I want to see what it looks like when she hates me but still has to marry me." Chapter 20. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Willow and I returned to the Hutone courtyard during our New Year holiday, just in time for the spring festival. Together with Makoto, we brought New Year's gifts to the Liu family. After the scandal, Father Liu had approached the Wong family, intending to call off the engagement, but Makoto refused, no matter what. Left with no choice, Father Liu could only delay the matter for the time being. That day, several tables were set up in the Liu family's main hall. The 3 families sat together, with the 2 young couples sharing a table and some neighbors at the next. The atmosphere was lively with laughter and chatter. During the meal, I kept offering dishes and pouring tea for Willow. Our hands were clasped tightly under the table, and the silent glances we exchanged were filled with affection. The uncles and aunties around us couldn't help but tease. "George really knows how to take care of his wife, handsome, smart, and attentive." Meanwhile, Makoto, sitting across the table, saw his chance and leaned in to sneer at Alicia. "What? Feeling miserable now? Watching you suffer brings me so much joy." Alicia's face went pale, her lips trembling with anger. Just as she was about to snap back, someone nearby chimed in with a scolding tone. "Makoto, look at George, know how to love his wife. Maybe you should take a few notes." And then someone else added with biting sarcasm, "Let's be honest. Makoto doesn't just need to learn how to treat his wife from George, he probably needs George's help finding work too. No choice, right? After ruining his reputation, he can't work as a doctor anymore. Being a delivery driver is about as good as it gets." From the scattered conversations, Willow and I pieced together the story. After being discharged from the hospital, Makoto had gone back to beg the hospital director for his job, but the director refused flat out. Left with no other option, the Wong family scoured the city for any open positions. But in a place like suburban Beijing, every job was already spoken for. In the end, the only job left was a driver position at the supply co-op, ironically, the one I had vacated after entering the military academy. At first, Makoto was furious. How could George go from being a co-op driver to a top-scoring student who made it into a military academy, while he went from a doctor to a mere driver? That thought lit a fire of envy and resentment in his eyes, consuming every bit of rationality he had left, and it was all thanks to that crazy woman, Alicia. If she hadn't caused that scandal at the hospital, if she hadn't exposed their affair, he wouldn't have become the laughingstock of the city. No one cared about the darkening storm on Makoto's face. Instead, their eyes shifted to Alicia, and the teasing grew even sharper. "Look at that. The second Liu girl drove away a golden goose and ended up with a broken-down deliveryman. Right, she used to look down on George for being a driver. Guess what? Now she's stuck with one for real." Alicia's red lips were pressed into a tight line. She bit so hard she could taste blood. They weren't wrong. If she hadn't made such a mess of things, if she hadn't pushed George away, would she be sitting here today as a joke? She dug her nails into her palms, holding back her anger and humiliation, but her eyes couldn't help drifting toward George, sorrow written all over her face. Makoto saw the look and let out another scoff. I didn't take any of it to heart. After what Makoto had done to me, I didn't have even a shred of sympathy left. This was karma. God sees everything, and now the scales were balancing. Later that day, the three families discussed the wedding date. The 8th day of the Lunar New Year was a rare auspicious day, perfect for a wedding celebration. My uncle and I were overjoyed, already making plans for what gifts to buy and what preparations to make. Meanwhile, Makoto and the Wong elders looked like they were attending a funeral, but since Makoto refused to break off the engagement, his parents had no choice but to help prepare for a wedding that no one truly wanted. Chapter 21. In the blink of an eye, the wedding day arrived. The Hutong courtyard was adorned with red silk ribbons, festive decorations everywhere, exuding joy and celebration. Dressed in my groom's attire, I arrived early at the Liu residence. The moment I saw Willow in her bridal dress, my heart brimmed with admiration and longing. While we were waiting, Makoto also showed up. I couldn't explain why, but something about him felt off. He carried an eerie stillness, a strange aura of death clinging to him. I furrowed my brows and thought. Willow, puzzled, asked, "What's wrong?" I quickly smiled and shook my head. "Nothing. I'm just really happy I get to marry you." Willow gave me a playful glare, blushing deeply. When the auspicious hour arrived, both grooms were to escort their brides in a ceremonial walk around the Hutong, symbolizing a complete and fulfilling marriage. After offering blessings and farewells to the Liu elders, we prepared to head out. Makoto glanced at Alicia and sneered. "Aren't you going to say goodbye to your ex-lover? This might be your last chance." That twisted smile on his face, cold and cryptic, sent chills down my spine. But Alicia, by now used to his creepy tone, didn't bother responding. She simply muttered, "Freak." Even so, her eyes clung tightly to George's back. But that man, me, had eyes only for Willow. Not once did I turn to look at her. Alicia's heart filled with bitterness. Her eyes welled with tears that nearly spilled over. Makoto, catching that expression, grinned even wider. There was something ghostly in his smile. I, unaware of the ominous tension behind me, drove off with Willow, heading straight ahead in our wedding car. Just as Alicia was about to get into her own car, Makoto, already seated, suddenly slammed his foot on the gas. In a flash, he drove straight into her. Screams erupted around us. Makoto didn't stop. He drove over her body like she was nothing but a speed bump, leaving behind a trail of blood. Ah! Help! The shrieks were endless. Finally, the car came to a slow halt. Makoto stepped out casually, his expression cold, his smile twisted, like a man who'd finally gotten what he wanted. Alicia lay collapsed on the ground, face covered in blood. Her white wedding dress was soaked in red. Unbearable pain surged through her body. She truly thought she was dying. In those fleeting moments, her entire life flashed before her eyes. She saw herself and George in wedding attire, smiling amidst cheers as they walked into their new home. Then the scene twisted into their wedding night, where she left him to sleep alone in an empty room. Another image followed, George lying lifeless on the ground, soaked in red, while she stood nearby, cold and emotionless. Finally, she saw herself, face twisted in rage, smothering George with a pillow. Only then did her dead eyes seem to flicker with emotion. The noise around her grew louder. By the time she was rushed into the emergency room, it was too late. She died right there on the operating table, eyes wide open in disbelief. No matter how hard the doctors tried, they couldn't close them. Mother Lu collapsed to the ground in a wail of anguish. The Wong parents wept too, not for Alicia, but for their son Makoto, whose life was now ruined. He was convicted of intentional assault with fatal consequences, sentenced to life in prison. When the police came to take him away, Makoto showed no resistance. He was calm, eerily so, even smiling at his parents on the way out. Behind him, the two elderly Wongs wept like death itself had visited. Because of Alicia and Makoto, our wedding was postponed. Instead, I helped with Alicia's funeral while also supporting Mr. and Mrs. Liu through their grief. As Willow's fiancé, I took on everything, organizing the mourning hall, coordinating funeral services, and informing family and friends. I didn't complain once. Within days, I had visibly lost weight. Willow cupped my face in her hands, heart aching. "Thank you," she whispered. I pulled her into a tight embrace and murmured, "Don't be silly. Your family is my family now." What I didn't say was that none of this was for the Liu family. It was all for Willow. I never imagined that Alicia and Makoto would meet such a tragic, violent end. When Alicia died, every bone in her body was shattered. Makoto never intended to spare her. He floored the gas when he struck, determined to end her life. She had ruined his reputation and career, so he chose to end her life on her wedding day. Those two maniacs, they truly were a match made in hell. Maybe it was my rebirth that altered the course of this story and changed everyone's fates. But I felt no guilt, because in our last life, they both owed me. I held a stick of incense, my gaze calm as I stared at Alicia's photo. Silently, I whispered, Now, we're even. Then I placed the incense in the censer and turned, walking toward the woman whose eyes had always been warm. This life, Willow was the only harbor that had ever waited for me.